Hey fam. So, in my last video, I had a brief aside where I verbally attacked Shigeru Miyamoto for a hot minute. You know, the usual anti-story stuff, and I was quite surprised to find a decent number of people taking wild offense to this and defending him like he was their own child. However, one very nice commenter gave me some context on this by informing me that much of the current narrative surrounding Miyamoto's tastes and influence at Nintendo are apparently rather inaccurate and the result of some wild spreading of misinformation. He linked me to a video by SuperMarioT called No, Miyamoto Doesn't Dislike Story, and it was very interesting. I'm going to leave a link in the video description, and I do advise giving it a watch when you have the time. It was made primarily as a response to Arlo's recent video on the subject, but its scope extends well beyond that. The creator is very articulate, and the video is clearly well researched. I am using SuperMarioT's video to frame the sequence of my arguments, but it is primarily my take on the larger pro versus anti-Miyamoto debate. I do not personally know SuperMarioT, and I have absolutely nothing against the guy. I'm just offering a counterpoint to some of the arguments he presents, which I'm assuming represent a decent majority of Miyamoto defenders or apologists, however you want to think of them. Again, no disrespect is intended whatsoever, but I think some of his evidence was a bit flimsy insofar as I looked at the very interviews and citations he brought up and interpreted them in the complete opposite way, which suggests that there is some ambiguity there to begin with. A very brief history on this topic for anyone who doesn't know. Shigeru Miyamoto is a legendary game designer who is in many ways the godfather of modern gaming as we know it. He was essentially a pioneer in the realm of game design when the home console industry was fresh out of the womb, and he birthed multiple legendary video game IPs, including Mario and Zelda. He's done a lot for the industry, and I agree that he deserves all the respect in the world for his accomplishments. However, in recent years, his game design philosophy, an ostensibly anti-narrative one, has come under scrutiny by Nintendo fans. I believe the origin of this was an interview regarding his input into the development of Paper Mario Sticker Star, the game which essentially signed the death knell for Paper Mario as we knew it. There are those who would argue Super Paper Mario did this first, but given Super's emphasis on narrative, creative world themes, and original characters and scenarios, I would argue that it was more of a slight mutation than a total deviation. Now, I'm not going into further detail than this regarding background. Frankly, I think those details are boring, and believe it or not, they're a bit secondary to the thesis of this video. What I want to discuss today are two things. One, much of the so-called evidence that Miyamoto's defenders enjoy citing is, in my opinion, flimsy at best. And two, honestly, anti-Miyamotoists don't really care who is responsible for the decisions being made at Nintendo, and we're not looking for a scapegoat, so this constant character defense routine isn't actually much more than a semantic argument to us. We are responding to changes and decisions being put out by Nintendo. Even if Miyamoto is being blamed wrongfully, nothing being said about him by fans online is affecting him career-wise or financially nearly enough to be worth a defamation case. And frankly, I'm pretty sure he's not aware of any of this at all. It's completely outside his periphery. So the next time someone gets bent out of shape about Miyamoto's effect at Nintendo, just replace the word Miyamoto with Nintendo and move on with your day. I think it will greatly increase your understanding of the argument generally being made in any context in which his name is negatively invoked. With that out of the way, let's get into the meat of this. I want to address SuperMarioT's evidence that Miyamoto totally likes and supports and values narratives in games. First off, I want to acknowledge his first citation, that being the Pikmin franchise in general, which is notoriously one of Miyamoto's personal favorite brainchildren. The Pikmin games have admittedly grown slightly more narratively involved at a consistent and steady rate as the series went on, barring one massive hiccup in Hey Pikmin. Honestly, I have no counterargument for this. I think it is by far his strongest piece of supporting evidence, and I want to acknowledge it so that it doesn't look like I'm just cherry-picking. I'm not going to discuss every single thing he says at length here. His video is an hour and 5 minutes long, but I want to give credit where I feel it is due as much as possible, on the big picture points I want to examine. His next major citation, however, is the admittance of the Rosalina Storybook segments into Super Mario Galaxy, and this marks the first instance of what I feel to be a very misguided recurring argument in which he conflates placid acceptance of other developers' ideas for genuine interest and investment in narrative elements serving as an important component of a game's design. First of all, the Rosalina Storybook isn't exactly what I would call compelling in the traditional sense. It's just sort of there. Yoshiaki Koizumi created it, and Miyamoto allowed it to pass. This is not an act of passion on Miyamoto's part, nor is it an act of active approval. I read this as a statement of neutrality, and this general attitude of disinterest with narrative continues into the development of Super Mario Galaxy 2. During this segment of his video, SuperMarioT begins to present an admittedly well-substantiated argument that Miyamoto doesn't always take an active role in the development of every single Nintendo game, or even mainline Mario game. He provides a developer interview as evidence that Miyamoto didn't actively work to minimize the narrative components of that game, which were noticeably less fleshed out than in the original Galaxy, which was already light on story to begin with. This is a very fair assertion, and it ties into a larger point that he is trying to get across. The fact that Miyamoto does not actively go around attempting to shut down all seedlings of a story or smatterings of narrative elements in the projects he is involved in. And while I concede this point to him 100% for this and other interviews he invokes, I do still believe that Miyamoto is complicit to some larger issues that he did help to create. Which leads us into the juicy, age-old Paper Mario debate, and this is where I get to flex a bit and start really having some fun with the Miyamoto apologists. Paper Mario Sticker Star marks the birth of this newer Miyamoto versus Tanabe narrative. Basically, the crux of this is that Kensuke Tanabe was primarily responsible for the actual development of the modern Paper Mario trilogy, the most recent 3 games. Now, right off the bat, we have a direct interview citation in which Tanabe states something to the effect of Sticker Star's initial design more closely resembling the Thousand Year Door, aka the greatest Mario RPG of all time, but being told by Miyamoto, and I quote, "It's fine without a story, so do we really need one?" And, as much as possible, complete it with only characters from the Super Mario world. Interestingly, SuperMarioT has no actual defense for this. He instead chooses to focus on a separate, less frequently cited section of the interview, in which Tanabe states that Miyamoto played a later build of the product as well and found the gameplay boring, which is just okay. His point being that Tanabe is at fault for only addressing story concerns, but not gameplay ones, a sentiment which is broadly shared by Miyamoto stans, and is kind of the foundation of the "it's Tanabe's fault" argument. They also like to claim that Tanabe misinterpreted Miyamoto's suggestion and took it too far, a claim which I have yet to see any substantial evidence for, since the quote here looks pretty black and white to me, but for the sake of argument, I'll pretend this claim might maybe hold a little water in a world where Sticker Star was the sole deviation from the Paper Mario formula and remained an isolated black sheep within the franchise. The thing is, that's not the world we live in. Now, I'll admit, I don't know the exact hierarchy of decision-making power at Nintendo headquarters. I don't think anybody does. Miyamoto does seem to hold some vague, amorphous sense of influence there, as evidenced by all these interviews of other devs talking about running things by him for his suggestions or approval. And I don't know exactly how much say he has in the final product of projects he's not directly involved in, but I do know this. The current state of Paper Mario, this post-Sticker Star era has gone on for 3 games and, as of the time of this video's posting, 11 years. The current state of Paper Mario has been allowed to go on like this for 11 years. Okay, there is no version of events in which I can buy this Miyamoto super-like stories, you guys, oh my god, he's so misunderstood argument when things have deteriorated this far for this long. Miyamoto defenders like to cite Tanabe as the culprit because he took Miyamoto's suggestions too far and never corrected them. But my rebuttal to that argument is that if he really misinterpreted Miyamoto's words, and it was really important to Miyamoto that Paper Mario have a certain level of narrative quality and mechanical depth, then why didn't he set the record straight with Tanabe? See, this all stemmed from Miyamoto's rejection of the Thousand Year Door-esque build of Sticker Star, and yet Intelligent Systems continues to run these projects by him for approval. If he truly cared so much and is so pro-story, then it behooves him to correct this misunderstanding. Okay, when you genuinely care or are invested in someone or something, you intervene when they are going down the wrong path or have the wrong takeaway from something you did or said. Obviously, Miyamoto can't take on every project himself, but if he is giving sanction and approval to large-scale design decisions, then he is fundamentally complicit when the people below him produce dog shit. Tanabe continuing down this path for 3 games straight in response to a suggestion by Miyamoto, which may or may not have been misinterpreted but was clearly never clarified or corrected by the guy, is not on Tanabe. That is on Miyamoto. Like, if you worked at Subway and you thought your supervisor told you to, I don't know, spit in all the sandwiches, but he actually told you to put your gloves on before making them, and then he watched you spit in all the sandwiches multiple times in a row, but just didn't correct you, that's fucking on him. If Miyamoto pushed Tanabe in the wrong direction, even accidentally, but then stood idly by as Tanabe continued to screw up, then he is complicit in allowing his own mess to continue. Anyway, the next argument in support of Miyamoto and against Tanabe that SuperMarioT presents is an interview surrounding Color Splash, in which Tanabe states that we as a team have almost complete control over the creative direction of the game. This seems to be a common defense by Miyamoto apologists in general. I've seen it invoked elsewhere. This line is often cited as evidence that Miyamoto didn't intervene, but here's the thing. Almost complete creative control is such a vague statement that frankly I don't think it can compellingly be used as proof of anything. Almost complete control? Like, what is that? Can you operationally define almost in this case? It's completely amorphous and subjective. It could mean literally anything. Were they in control of the gameplay but not the story? Were they in control of the gameplay and story, but not the characters or aesthetics? Like, where is the line here? And who exactly is drawing it? Because it sure seems like Miyamoto is drawing it. The quote goes on to read, Miyamoto-san took a look at the game's development once or twice, but there were no specific change requests. Again, this is literally just proof positive that Miyamoto was totally complicit in the murder of Paper Mario, and is, at best, indifferent as fuck to the narrative elements of those games. Moving on, we have, however, all character designs have to go through a review by our IP team, and it's really rigorous. Nonetheless, this time we were allowed to change the outfits of some toads in the game. Oh, you were allowed to change the outfits of some toads this time around? Wow, thank you, IP team. But in all seriousness, here I have another question regarding who exactly is pulling the strings here. I assume that Miyamoto stands like to think of this vague as fuck IP team as a separate entity from Miyamoto because it is framed as such in this interview. But who put them there exactly? Who gave them this rigorous criteria to keep everything on brand, as it were? Because I distinctly remember Miyamoto saying, as much as possible, complete it with only characters from the Super Mario world. only characters from the Super Mario world. Now, to be fair, obviously I can't prove that Miyamoto is the one giving directions to this IP team, but honestly, it doesn't really matter for reasons I'm going to go into a bit later because it ties into this video's second thesis. In the meantime, I think my Miyamoto is complicit in all this and indifferent to narratives at best argument speaks for itself. And all this is to say nothing of the infamous Origami King interview with the "Since Paper Mario sticker star, it is no longer possible to modify Mario characters or to create original characters that touch on the Mario universe," quote, which SuperMarioT doesn't even mention or touch on. Again, technically, we don't really know where this stipulation originates from, but whether it's Miyamoto or this definitely completely unrelated IP team, somebody gave this order, and it doesn't exactly sound like complete creative control for Tanabe's team, does it? Moving on, SuperMarioT's next piece of evidence for Miyamoto being totally on board with story you guys I'm being seriously is the inclusion of added narrative elements in Star Fox Zero. To which I reply, for anyone who doesn't know, Star Fox Zero is the fourth reiteration of the original SNES Star Fox's story, and the quote-unquote added narrative it brings to the table is this tiny, paper-thin plot thread about Andross's new portal technology that gets barely any serious dialogue to flesh it out, and does literally nothing other than contextualize replaying stages in a different order. It's this absolute nothing burger of an addition, and I'm sorry, but I absolutely, categorically refuse to accept this submission as evidence of anything other than the Miyamoto doesn't give a shit about narrative argument. I need to reiterate that absolutely Star Fox zero disrespect is intended towards SuperMarioT, but in all candor, this citation may as well have been playing for the other team. Interestingly, SuperMarioT also cites a Miyamoto interview surrounding Star Fox Zero's development in which Miyamoto claims that he paid a lot of attention to the story. But the fact of the matter is that if that is in any way true, then it only makes him look more inept and pathetic, because anyone who has played Star Fox Zero can tell you that any attention he paid to its narrative elements is not evident at all. He also cites the creation of that opening short as evidence of Miyamoto being invested in narrative. And this is an okay argument, I guess, but it's really just a prologue to the game's central action, which has some admittedly nice world building, but functionally only fleshes out the moments leading up to the events of Star Fox Zero, which, by extension, are the same exact events seen in Star Fox, Star Fox 64, and Star Fox 64 3D. You know, literally over half of the entire Star Fox franchise, because Miyamoto loves story, you guys. It's such a priority to him. SuperMarioT's next major citation is the more hands-off nature of Miyamoto's involvement with Super Mario Odyssey, but this is, to me, simply the positive inversion of the Paper Mario principle. It is complicit behavior. It is indifference. He did not interfere, but this time the outcome was creative and positive. Interestingly, he also didn't offer any creatively bankrupt suggestions for the team to misinterpret. Next, we have Mario plus Rabbids Kingdom Battle, to which I offer the same rebuttal. It's great that he does not actively stand in the way of zany creative ideas. But it's also simple, neutral, complicit behavior. He doesn't care. In fact, here it becomes a bit damaging again, because even if he is not directly involved in the game's production, he is greenlighting and approving of a severely underbaked narrative, in frankly, both Rabbids titles. These are actually fairly excellent RPGs, mechanically speaking, but they're not exactly winning any awards for narrative or character building. I mean, half the playable cast are fucking minions cosplaying as other members of the playable cast. Like, what? When did the bar get this fucking low? Oh, that's right. Right around the time Miyamoto told Tanabe to avoid imagery from outside the pre-established, sanitized New Super Mario Bros. Aesthetic as much as possible.
I wonder if there's a connection.
Lastly, I want to take a look at SuperMarioT's final piece of pro-Miyamoto evidence, which I have also seen cited by others on multiple occasions, and oh boy, have I been looking forward to this one. So, Miyamoto apologists love citing the existence of the Mario movie as Miyamoto being pro-narrative. They're always like, well, if he hates stories so much, then why did he allow a Mario movie to be made? And with so much creative freedom. Bitch, are you kidding me? It's a fucking movie! You want me to be impressed that he allowed writers to write a story for a fucking movie? Do you also want me to be impressed that he allows other humans in his vicinity to continue breathing? Obviously, he's going to allow a narrative in a movie. He isn't fucking insane. There's no gameplay to fall back on. And don't take the Mario movie as evidence of some great narrative artistic integrity, okay? It's a big Hollywood spectacle. It was created to make bank, which it did. It's not a monument to his passion for narrative quality. It's a fucking product made for consumption. I can't believe people are seriously rallying behind this stupid movie as proof that Miyamoto totally loves narratives in games. Man, get the fuck out of here. SuperMarioT also brings up Miyamoto's statement about, and I quote, avoiding casting Mario too rigidly, which is just such a vapid bullshit PR statement. Okay, I don't have any sources to support this, but I promise you that Chris Pratt's casting as Mario was a cynical Hollywood machine decision made solely to increase ticket sales. It was in no way a result of Miyamoto's artistic desire to not be too rigid with the casting. If you are seriously citing this as evidence of anything, then I'm assuming you also believe that Palpatine's return in The Rise of Skywalker was totally planned all along and definitely foreshadowed in The Force Awakens. Like, come on, how gullible are you people? Finally, I want to wrap this up by addressing my second thesis. Miyamoto was never the point. What Miyamoto apologists need to understand is that when people complain about his effect on Paper Mario and other baffling production decisions made over at Nintendo, they're citing the person they believe to be primarily responsible, based on some pretty reasonable evidence, but they're complaining about the actions produced by the company. Say what you want about Miyamoto's stances during interviews and Tanabe's assertions about him, but a lot of these interviews are vapid PR stunts anyway, and actions speak louder than words. Look, I don't know with 100% certainty who is greenlighting projects like Federation Force, Hey Pikmin, and Chibi Robo Ziplash. I don't know exactly who's responsible for keeping F-Zero on ice on the grounds that they can't come up with some dumbass new gimmick, all the while pumping out 4 sanitized as fuck New Super Mario Bros. Games, and a direct sequel to Sticker Star, which was universally panned. I can't accurately tell you why Origami King stubbornly refused to revive Paper Mario 64's combat, or actually bring partners back in a non-Monkey's Paw Wish sort of way, or why the latter Mario and Luigi games were 10 times blander than the earlier ones, but I can tell you that these things are happening. These decisions are being made, and there are people approving them. Maybe just Miyamoto? Maybe him and others? Maybe even others and not him. But they are happening. Miyamoto does appear to have a hand in it, whether through direct action or active complacency. But regardless, the anti-Miyamoto crowd are complaining about the decisions being made at Nintendo. The decisions being made around Paper Mario, Star Fox, F-Zero, I could go on. And if Shigeru Miyamoto really has as much weight to swing around as all these interviews imply he does, then it behooves him to step in and fix this problem. I will believe that he has come around on the importance of quality narratives in games when they start showing up in the projects he's associated with, both directly and indirectly. In the meantime, all the pro-Miyamoto evidence I'm seeing simply indicates that he is, at best, wildly indifferent. So much so that he was completely complicit in the ongoing desecration of one of Mario's absolute best subseries of all time. Complacency is not value, and it is not passion. It is indifference. And the claim that he isn't anti-story is not much better than the clear indication that he certainly isn't pro-story, or even pro-quality enough to fix Sticker Star, Color Splash, and even Origami King's objectively, fundamentally broken gameplay design. Not being anti-story is not the same thing as being pro-story, and this distinction matters. I rest my case.